OPEC and its allies are sticking with their plan to increase oil output in February amid pressure from the US to increase production despite a spike in global COVID-19 cases. The group of oil-producing nations is set to raise output by 400,000 barrels per day next month, gradually restoring the production that was cut at the start of the pandemic. OPEC Plus says the impact of the Omicron variant is expected to be short-lived as the world becomes better equipped in managing the effects of COVID-19. And while a supply surplus is still expected to emerge, the cartel says it's likely to be smaller than previously thought. Well, let's get more on this now with independent oil industry analyst Neil Atkinson, who joins us now from Paris. Good to have you back with us, Neil. So in line with their recent meetings, OPEC Plus have decided to stay the course and only modestly increase production by 400,000 barrels per day next month. Was this in line with your expectations?
Oh, it's exactly what I expected, and I think pretty well every analyst thought there was no other likely course of action. OPEC, of course, like everybody else, is trying to figure out how serious the Omicron variant is. It looks as if it's not going to be as serious as the earlier Delta variant, for example. So it could well be that the worst of Omicron is behind us. But they're being cautious. They're taking each meeting step by step, each month, seeing how much oil they think the market can absorb. And they've taken what I think is a very cautious and sensible step at their meeting this afternoon.
We know OPEC Plus members have now restarted about 2/3 of the production that they halted in 2020 when they cut a record 10 million barrels per day because of the pandemic. Do you believe their cautious, resurrection of this output is in line with the recovery in demand that we're seeing across the globe?
Oh, pretty well, yes. The oil supply and demand are roughly in balance currently, although it is expected that in the next few months, oil production is likely to be a little bit in excess of demand. We need to remember, of course, that the deal that we're talking about here was struck in April 2020, when the market was in its very worst state as the full extent of the pandemic became apparent. And it's quite incredible that nearly 2 years after that deal was made, here we are continuing to implement that deal step by step, cautiously. So I think it's something of a tribute to the decision makers and the planners within the OPEC Plus countries that their deal has in fact stood the test of time.
We know countries like the United States have been quite vocal about urging these oil producers to ramp up production in order to bring the price of petrol down, not only in the US, but also across the globe. So far, OPEC Plus doesn't seem to have played ball. Why is that?
Well, I think it's a question of realizing that the sole purpose of the international oil market is not to serve the interests of US motorists. There are a lot of other factors at play here, and we need to remember that, yes, rising prices are not good for consumers. It does, of course, hit them directly in the pocketbook, but the producers have their own interests. They too were damaged by the pandemic in 2020 as production went down, prices went down. They were hit in the pocketbook too. So they're trying to repair the economic damage that the pandemic has caused. And what we're trying to do here is find a balance between the interests of consumers and the interests of the producers. And I think the OPEC Plus countries have done a pretty good job. And as far as the US is concerned, of course, there is the additional political factor of the midterm elections in 2022. So it would not be a surprise if we see more pressure from the United States with respect to oil prices in the next few weeks and months.
Just quickly on oil prices, the price of Brent crude is currently sitting at just below $80 a barrel. Do you believe that OPEC Plus members have a target in mind? Do they want to rise to a certain point before they think about perhaps ramping up production?
Well, there is no explicit target price, of course, announced by the OPEC Plus members. But I would think, based on their budgets and based on statements from various ministers over recent months, that they would not like to see the price fall below something like $65 a barrel. But on the other hand, if prices do start to rise into and through the 80s, they recognize that that is damaging to the global economy and the recovery from the pandemic. So they may well take action at that point to put more supply into the market if they can, to try and keep a lid on prices. It's finding this comfort range, this sweet spot. That's what they're trying to do.
Okay, Neil Atkinson in Paris. Really good to get your analysis. Thank you for that.
Thank you.